Well, in today's gospel reading, Jesus asked the disciples a question. He asked them, "Who do you say that I am?" So that's the question I want to ask you today. Who do you say Jesus is? I mean, when you close your eyes to pray to Jesus, to whom are you speaking? Who are you imagining in your mind's eye? Is it this guy? This is the image of Jesus that I grew up with. This image of Jesus was on display above the blackboards of every classroom of the Catholic Church I attended growing up. And this image was also framed on the wall of my parents' bedroom, too. Maybe your image of Jesus is one of the images that we see on display in famous paintings by renowned artists over the centuries. Or maybe your image of Jesus is more in line with the depictions we've seen of Jesus in famous Hollywood movies or TV shows. But you know, Jesus didn't look like any of these guys. He didn't look like any of these images. So who was the real Jesus? What was he really like? Well, back in 2017, I gave a message here at Douglas UCC in which I talked about the real Jesus. To date, that message remains our most watched video on our church's YouTube channel. That one video alone has more than 190,000 views and more than 5,000 comments. Now, many of those comments are negative ones, because in that message, I displayed an image of Jesus that was imagined in recent years by some of the world's most famous Jesus scholars and anthropologists. And this is what they believe the real Jesus looked like. Is this how you see Jesus? Is this the guy to whom you pray? Most Christians in America today wouldn't want this guy sitting next to them on an airplane. They wouldn't want a guy like this walking through their neighborhood at night or moving into their community. Many Christians in America today want to ban this guy from entering into our country. Now, in that 2017 video, which is entitled "Jesus Wasn't White," many of the comments ask, why does it matter so much what Jesus looked like? Well, I think it matters a great deal. I believe that if we had been raised with more authentic images of Jesus in our churches, in our schools, and in our homes, that we would be much more compassionate and much more concerned about the other, about the least of these in our midst. Jesus, you see, was a poor, dark-skinned, Middle Eastern refugee. His real name was Yeshua, and Yeshua spoke Aramaic. He led a revolutionary countercultural movement of the marginalized and of the oppressed. Yeshua bravely spoke truth to the religious and political authorities of his day. He so challenged their authority that they needed to silence him. And that's why I think it is so important that we know who the real Jesus was, so that when we see the Middle Eastern man on the airplane speaking Arabic, or the poor, homeless teenage mother, or the children in cages at our nation's border detention centers, we will see the Christ in our midst. And we will become more loving, more compassionate, and more inclusive. The American political commentator John Fugelsang went viral a couple of years ago with the following words that have now been printed on posters and T-shirts. He said, "Jesus was a radical, nonviolent revolutionary who hung around with lepers, hookers, and crooks, wasn't American and never spoke English, was anti-wealth, anti-death penalty, anti-public prayer, was never anti-gay, never mentioned abortion or birth control, never called the poor lazy, never justified torture, never fought for tax cuts for the wealthiest Nazarenes, never asked a leper for a copay, and was a long-haired, brown-skinned, homeless, community organizing, anti-slut-shaming Middle Eastern Jew. That's who Jesus was. Now, some of you may remember that back in 2018, the popular Christian pastor and best-selling author John Pavlovitz came right here to Douglas UCC, and he delivered a very powerful message for us that day about who Jesus really was. Of Jesus, John Pavlovitz said, he rejected the exclusion and rigidity of religious fundamentalists. He championed the poor and opposed the powerful. He freely gave food to the hungry and care to the sick. He welcomed women in ministry and treated them as equals. He decried personal and systemic violence. He condemned the hoarding of wealth. He was an activist for the common good. Jesus was a progressive. That's who Jesus was. And if we are to truly call ourselves Christians, followers of his way, then we better know who he really was so that we can more fully support his agenda and follow in his steps. One of our UCC national leaders, the Reverend Tracy Blackman, said, most of Jesus' public ministry was spent reaching out to those who were ignored in the community and underserved by the ruling class. In my quest to follow him, I am compelled to do the same. That is why it is so important for us to know who Jesus really was, so that we can more fully follow in his steps. This white, gun-carrying, flag-draped, English-speaking Jesus, he never existed. If the real Jesus came back today, most Christians in America wouldn't even recognize him. It is time for us to see Jesus more clearly. And so, my friends, I would like to invite you this week to find time each and every day to spend with the real Jesus. I want to encourage you to pray with images of Jesus that are different from the ones in which you were raised. Beautiful and profound images such as these. I believe that images such as these, they can help transform our hearts and our minds so that we can begin to see Jesus more clearly, to love Jesus more dearly, and to follow in the way of Jesus more nearly. Namaste. Hello, everybody. This is Sal Sapienza, and I'm so excited to share with all of you that I've written a brand new book. The book is called Childish Thinking: How the Church Keeps Us Stuck in Sunday School. Now, the title Childish Thinking comes from Christian scripture, where we hear that if we wish to grow in spiritual understanding, then we must let go of childish ways of thinking. And yet so many Christians today, even after years of Bible study and Sunday services, still have a very elementary understanding of their faith. They still understand God as some old man with a long gray beard. They think heaven is a place up in the clouds with pearly gates, that the devil is some red guy with horns and a pitchfork, and that hell is a fiery place below the earth. Those are things that we tell children. None of those descriptions appear anywhere in the Bible. And so in Childish Thinking, I try to dispel many of those misnomers, and I explore topics such as God, Jesus, heaven, hell, sin, prayer, and resurrection from the higher perspectives of ancient Christian mystics and contemporary progressive theologians. After each chapter, there are prayers for quiet contemplation and questions for personal reflection and journal writing. Come learn how you can let go of old ways of thinking and begin to see things with new eyes. Come and learn how you can finally graduate from Sunday school. The book is available now on Amazon, and you can read the entire introduction at childishthinking.faith.